In this video, we're going to talk about how you can use native SQL as opposed to portable SQL when building a list control in a UX component. So you can see here we have a list control that is pulling data from the customer table in Northwind, and normally when you want to do that, you would go to the list control and you would set your data source to a SQL data source, and then you would enter your SQL statement over here. But when you enter your SQL statement using this approach, you need to use portable SQL because the list control relies on its ability to parse the SQL so that it can generate sort expressions and filter expressions, etc. So if you want to enter native SQL, which would mean that Alpha Anywhere cannot parse the SQL statement, then you need to use a custom data source. So you can see here in this particular case we've defined a custom data source, and then we specified that our XBasic function is called list data. So now we can go to our list data function over here, and you can see in the list data function we're executing some SQL, and in this case the SQL that we execute is going to be native SQL, not portable SQL. So the XBasic function needs to either return a CRL delimited string of data or JSON format data. So before we actually look at this code over here, let's go to the code editor in Alpha and look at the SQL that we're going to execute. So first we're going to write a simple test script here so we can play with the SQL. So we're going to basically go here and open our connection. We're going to create a connection object, and then we're going to open the connection pointing to the SQL Server Northwind instance, and then we're going to execute this SQL query here, which could be a native SQL query. Then we're going to get our result set, and the first option we're going to explore is the toJSON object syntax method, which gives us a CRL delimited string of JSON objects. So if I go here and I just say show var of JSON at this point, so let's go ahead there and run this, we can see that what we have here is a CRL delimited string where each row is a JSON object. So we've got customer ID, ALF key, contact name, etc. But this is not really the correct format yet because it needs to be a JSON array. So we need to have commas between each rows in the array, and then a leading square bracket and trailing square bracket. So you can see that in the next line here, basically we've done an all trim on this JSON string, which removes the trailing CRLF, and then we've translated CRLFs into comma plus CRLF, and then added on the opening and closing square brackets. So you can see here that there's our opening square bracket, there's a comma now between each row of data, but if we go down to the very last row, there's no trailing comma over there, and then there's the closing square bracket. So this here is valid JSON syntax for an array. And then if we basically go here and then let's uncomment this code over here, if we run it, we'll see, oops, sorry, uncommented a little bit too much code. So let's go here and comment that out over there now. So here we go, and again I've made another mistake, sorry. Let me also comment out this line over here, and let's run this now. So save this and run it. There we go. So what we see now is a CRL delimited string where basically each record is pipe delimited, and at the top of the list we have the field names. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing our discussion of how to use native SQL in a list control on a UX component. So let's go back now and take a look at the XBasic code behind this. So first we get our result set, then we basically dump out the result set as a pipe delimited string. So result set to string dumps out all the data starting at the first record and then continuing for all records. Then we set the formatting option to false here, and then this is the important part, we use the pipe delimiter. So that gives us a CRL delimited list of all the data, but we also need to put the field names in as the first row. So in order to do that, we look at the result set has a property called dbf row syntax, which looks like this. and so we know that we can take that property and then just strip off the field names, which are the first part of each row. So what we do here is we take the dbf row syntax, and then we call the for each method on it, and we basically return the first word using the comma as the delimiter. So that's going to give us a CRLF delimited string that looks like customer ID, contact name, city, and country. And then we basically do an all trim on that to remove the trailing CRLF, and then we convert CRLFs into pipes, and that gives us the pipe delimited string of field names, which we then just add on to the top of the string. So when we go ahead and run that, we can see we have the data in the format that we want. So now that we understand the XBasic syntax that is going to return the data in the right form for the list control, let's go back to our list now. So we can see that in the list we've specified that the data source is an XBasic function called list data. Then we've gone over to XBasic and we've defined a function called list data. It takes ESP, so this is what's passed into the event handler. So then here's our SQL, and we're returning basically in this case we're returning the JSON format from the XBasic function. So let's go back to controls now. So now we've specified our function. So there's our field names, there's our list layout, and now when we go over to working preview, we can see that basically we have our list based on that custom SQL. Now when you use native SQL as opposed to portable SQL, then you're responsible for a lot more of the list behavior. So you'll notice that if you want to go and turn on pagination or sorting, etc., you're going to need to make sure that you handle all of that and in your custom XBasic. And so you can see here, if you go here and look at sample XBasic functions, you can see here, for example, would be a sample function that handled callbacks and AJAX callbacks like navigation and sorting, etc. So you need to basically use code similar to what is shown here in the sample in your own working example. So in this video we've shown how you can use native SQL in a list control. However, it is quite a bit more work than using portable SQL, because when you use portable SQL, Alpha does so much of the work for you. So another option would be to create a SQL view. Obviously on your SQL view definition would use native SQL, and then your list control would be based on the view, which would mean that you don't have to go and use a custom data source for the list control. Thanks very much for watching.